Hello, and welcome back to HR Stew. My name is Regina Dyerly.
And I'm Holly Nehls.
And this is HR Stew.
Today we are diving into the world of customer service, where horror stories and hilarity often collide. But what sets apart a good customer service professional from a great one? It's the art of using tact in challenging situations. In this episode, we will be exploring how HR professionals can navigate customer service nightmares with grace and professionalism. To discuss this topic, we have our own client success manager, Lisa Carper, with us today.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lisa.
Let me start our discussion by asking, what has been your worst customer service situation and how did you handle it?
When I was thinking on tact in customer service, something came to mind. First job right out of college, worked for a retirement planning company, and, they had a slogan. It was seize the day. They took that and put it out there, and we had to use it in everything. Much like when you go to Chick-fil-A and they say, my pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure, for everything. So it was like, seize the day, seize the day, seize the day. And so, this is what they did then. I don't know if they still do it now, but being in the customer service realm, I had to say this at the end of every phone call that I took. Now, think to your personal lives. When do you call your retirement planning company?
When there's an issue.
When there's an issue, when the market is crazy, oftentimes when a loved one passes away.
Oh, yeah.
And you think of all these situations where you would call your retirement planning company and you get on a phone, you know where I'm going with
this.
And so we had to end the phone call by saying, seize the day. And we had to say it like that. They would, every once in a while, our phone calls were recorded. They had to pull phone calls. And if we didn't say that at the end, we would get a little mark, you need to say seize the day. So I remember one time specifically, someone had called very upset about something. And she definitely called us before. And I explained the situation. She wasn't happy, trying to advise her the best I can. And at the end, I was like, is there anything else I can help you with? She was like, no, but why don't you go seize the day? And then hung up on me. So, I don't know if it was not necessarily one specific really bad story, but it was, let's think about tact here. Like, I'm not going to say that to someone who called in about, trying to figure out their loved one's accounts that had passed away or things like that. And being fresh out of college, first job, it's like, I have to follow the rules.
I know, you're like, you seize the day too.
Yeah. So tact is very important. Even if you have a script, if you have rules you're supposed to follow, I think tact is knowing when and where is appropriate to
Say seize the day.
say seize the day. And now every time I see carpe diem or seize the day somewhere, I twitch a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, it doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore.
They stole that from you.
Yes.
This brings up a story for me because I actually was head of HR for a restaurant call center. So the good thing about, call center is that all the calls are recorded. Mm-hmm. Right, because sometimes people will complain about bad service, and they really did not get bad service, right? So it's nice having the calls recorded so you could listen back. But sometimes things go muck, and the service is really bad. And there was this one that I thought about it often, and we actually used it as a training for new hires as a what not to do. So this gentleman calls in to this restaurant, and it was outsourced, so we were answering from a consolidated call center, and tried to place his order, and the agent was talking very, very fast. And he sounded like he was older in age, and definitely was struggling to keep up with her to get his order placed. And he knew what he wanted. So he kept on asking if she could slow down. I can't hear you. Can you slow down? And she seemingly seemed to be talking faster, kind of on purpose. And so finally he was like, I just can't understand what you're saying. Can you slow down? And she went, do you want a piece of chocolate cake?
Oh, no.
Like that. And the guy was like, just got upset and hung up and then called back and complained, right? So obviously we listened to the call. That specific agent had issues in the past, and who knows, people get burnt out in customer service. So did she start out that way? I don't know. But she got to a place where she was unable to provide any sort of good customer service, and actually made the gentleman feel terrible.
Yeah.
So talking about tact, there was none in that interaction. And unfortunately, from an HR perspective, When you have someone who no longer can seemingly function in that role anymore, we went through the process of making sure that the clients was taken care of. So, but utilize that training call with all names removed as an opportunity to show people how things could go wrong and how taking a minute if you are getting upset or frustrated to actually let yourself decompress so that doesn't happen to you. And then you end up losing your job or getting written up or something like that. That isn't pleasant either.
So mine was something, and I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, I don't remember, but I, many, many years ago, worked at a big retailer, and it was back when people could still write checks and did on a regular basis.
People still write checks.
Well, not on a regular basis. When's the last time you wrote a check?
Fair.
This guy had come in and he was buying like $1,000 worth of equipment, and he hands the check to the cashier. And I was the customer service manager at the time. And he hands the check to the cashier, and she calls me up there and she's like, Holly, this doesn't look right. When the routing number is zigzagged and the account number is at an angle, it's probably a fraudulent check. So our process back then in the 90s was I'm dating myself, but our process back then was to call a 1-800 number, a fraudulent 1-800 number. We gave them all the information. If they gave us the okay, then
I remember that.
We could process. That. Yeah. But if they gave us the okay, we could process the check, and they would take ownership and they would clear it on our end. But obviously, visually, I could see it was not correct or not valid. And so I hung up the phone with the lady, and I told the guy, and I said, I'm sorry that, we can't accept this check at this time. And this man, we have customers in line, customers in the store. This man is screaming and yelling at me at the top of his lungs because he couldn't buy the equipment that he wanted to purchase. And I was like, I'm sorry, these are our rules, and, we have to follow them. I'm explaining myself over and over. He called me every name you could possibly imagine until my store manager came down and, told him he needed to leave and apologized again. But I kept my composure.
It's pretty intense, especially when someone's yelling in your face.
Yes, that's difficult to do.
In a public setting, in front of other people. Yeah, that's tough. Now, let's have some fun with a game of Would You Rather. In this segment, we'll explore some different scenarios that HR professionals may encounter in their customer service roles. And you will share insight on how you would handle the situation. And of course, which one would you rather endure? Would you rather deal with an angry customer who is venting their frustrations loudly, or with an angry customer who is using passive-aggressive language and tone?
I know for me, I would rather deal with a customer who's venting their frustration loudly. And I think the reason is because the other one, it really gets under my skin when people use passive aggressive language and tone. When someone's, loudly yelling, you can sit there. And I know when I was first in customer service, I felt like I had to just listen to it and take it and apologize. But I think that sometimes there comes a point where you have to value yourself enough to step away and say, that's enough.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree with the dealing with an angry customer who is venting their frustrations loudly. I think that those people sometimes just want to be heard. And if you actually listen to them and value what they have to say, sometimes it goes to the wayside and it's not it doesn't turn into a bigger issue where they continue and keep continuing and continuing. Mm-hmm. But the passive aggressive, I agree. It gets under my skin. And I too want to be passive aggressive in my responses.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, I can't do this.
So I'm going to go the other way just because, but also because I feel like I am a pro at dealing with passive aggressive behavior and it doesn't really bother me anymore. However, because I come from a loud Italian family, it is really hard for me not to yell back when somebody is yelling at me. Like I automatically escalate, and I'm working on it. I've been working on it for many, many years, but that is difficult for me to be yelled at. That's like, I don't know, that can make me see red a little bit. Not that I wouldn't deal with it, I'd handle it professionally, and sometimes you're sympathetic about why they're escalating and why they're yelling, but I think I would rather the passive-aggressive language.
Would you rather handle a customer complaint that requires a lengthy investigation and resolution, or a customer complaint that requires a difficult conversation to deliver unwelcome news?
I would rather handle a customer complaint that requires a lengthy investigation and resolution. And the reason is because being able to hand them documentation, information, as a customer myself, sometimes I like to know the why and how they approached a resolution. So I land on the first one.
I'm the opposite. I would rather have a difficult conversation and deliver unwelcome news. It probably says a lot about who I am. I don't want to go through the process of a lengthy investigation and digging up detail and digging up as to why. But I will deliver the hard conversations of this is what happened. This is why it happened. I will tell them why it happened and apologize, but...
Okay, first of all, this is a total trick question because sometimes at the end of that investigation, you'll have to still deliver bad news. So I feel like this is a trick. But I guess I would fall into the second one is maybe because of so many years of doing lengthy investigations, I would rather avoid all the red tape. And, I think delivering bad news in as positive and nice and kind and empathetic way as possible is a skill that I have. So I think I do it better than a lot of other people. So I'm not afraid to do that. I don't like it, but I'm not afraid to do it.
Would you rather apologize to a customer for a mistake made by your team or explain to a customer why a certain policy cannot be bent in their favor?
I would rather apologize to a customer for a mistake made by our team. I feel like I constantly try to figure out the bend or the gray or
It is a skill of yours.
The curve that we can find to accommodate the customer or client or whoever.
You find good outcomes.
Yeah.
You do, yeah.
But it's still compliant. So I would rather apologize for a mistake made by our team.
I'm the opposite on this one as well. I would rather explain why, because I can be a very black and white person. Like if I have a hard, no, you cannot do that, or we can't, or we can do this and we can't do that. I think I like that better. I think it's a personality thing.
I think I like that better too, just because if you have to apologize for your team, it means there was a mistake. And mistakes happen, but I'd rather not think about that. And I feel like even with situations where a rule can't be the same kind of thing, I think you could find workarounds a lot of the time. There's policies and rules in place for a reason that can't be bent, but I think a lot of times you could find some kind of middle ground.
Right.
Would you rather handle a customer complaint in person where you can use nonverbal cues and gestures, or handle a customer complaint over the phone where you solely rely on your verbal communication skills?
I think I'm better in person in general. It's easy to see. If you're sympathizing, I think it's easy to see it as well as hear it. But I think you could also, no, I'm waffling. So I'm going to stick with that answer. Never mind.
I
Stick with that
think
answer.
too, in person, you can see their reaction and if what you're saying, they're able to receive what you're saying and the explanation you're giving. So having those verbal cues or the social cues in person might be a better instance.
It's funny though, because generationally, this would be answered differently as well, I think. So me and you are Gen X. We both want to be in person.
Yeah.
Lisa, what have you?
Well, the millennial speaking here. It is a hard one to go back and forth because in my mind, I categorize A as the better option. Be in person, I think it can mean more, but at the same time, personally, I do prefer
Texting.
I don't mind being on the phone. I love FaceTiming. I love calling people.
I know.
So, but I do prefer over the phone. And the reason is because I can have notes and I can have my resources where I need them on my screen. And sometimes you can have that in person, but I think sometimes better, I have my notes in front of me right now. I really appreciated being able to read over them before this, but I do prefer the second one for that reason. Feel more prepared.
Right.
Would you rather handle a customer complaint from a longtime loyal customer who has high expectations of your company's service, or a new customer who is testing out your company's service for the first time?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the first one, the longtime loyal customer. And the reason is because they know what your typical service is like. Mm-hmm. They know that this is a one-off. I'm assuming we're talking about a company who has really good service all the time,
Right.
They know what you are typically like. So when there is a complaint, I feel like there's a little bit more teamwork involved rather than a first impression being bad.
I have to agree. I think handling customer complaints from a long-time loyal customer who knows your track record and what you've done for the company, their company, or their whatever services you're offering them, the one ding isn't going to affect you as much, or I think it will be received better by the client
Depending
or
on
customer.
how you handle it.
Yeah. As opposed to a new customer, because then they've already had negative interaction after negative interaction. You're constantly trying to build back up.
Yeah. I have a pretty good example of that. Company I was working for, I had started in this position, and I get on the phone my first couple of weeks with a customer, and she was not a decision maker. So she didn't have any kind of influence on our relationship with her business, and she was unhappy. But there was really nothing she could necessarily do about it because, like I said, she wasn't a decision maker. So I get on the phone with her. I call it the forever phone call. Where you listen and you listen and you listen. And I remember we got on the phone probably 3:00. Husband and I are sharing a car at the time. It's 5:00. Like, it was the longest phone call. I see my husband waiting down in the parking lot for me. Everybody had left and I'm still on the phone listening to her. The difference is nobody had listened to her before. And I noted all of her concerns, and then I made it a point to win her over and to make sure that things were on time for her like they hadn't been in the past. And eventually we became best friends. Just kidding. We became really, we had a really positive relationship after that. So but it took some time.
How many 2-hour phone calls did you have after that?
None.
Oh, wow.
I rarely had another phone call with her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She knew I was new. You know, she was like, I'm going to get my foot in the door early with this person so that they know how I feel and I want it to change. To her point, it wasn't done well in the past. So.
During this part of the podcast, we go to the online forum called Ask HR, where individuals can ask questions to HR professionals and get advice. This user, Sweaty Ankle Socks, from Florida, titled their question, "Client's mom constantly makes inappropriate comments. What do I do?" This user says, "I do in-home health therapy for children. A few months ago, I got a client whose mother was extremely talkative and poor with boundaries. As I am a stranger in their house working with their children, it's not uncommon for parents to sit in. However, she often takes over the session. An unspoken rule in this industry is to make the parents happy because it makes your job easier. So out of politeness, I would engage with her for a bit, but always made sure to redirect the attention back to the child. I am very non-confrontational and really didn't know how to react to these extremely personal rants, so essentially I let them happen. About 2 months ago, she started getting even more comfortable with me, divulging completely inappropriate information about her frustrated, intimate life and indirectly implying that she found me attractive. I was very uncomfortable in these situations and trying to avoid conflict. I kind of laughed it off and changed the subject. It's gotten to the point where even when I'm texting her to schedule, she'll make inappropriate innuendos. It's almost like she thinks it's funny to make me feel uncomfortable, and because I don't call it out, she assumes I like it. Recently, my girlfriend was using my computer and some of the texts from the woman popped up, which really upset her. She wants me to stop working there, which I understand, and says it's disrespecting our relationship. I didn't feel threatened by the comments, just very uncomfortable, so I kind of just put up with it. But looking at it from her perspective, I totally see why she would be upset. I want to tell my boss and ask for a different therapist to take over, but I am new with the company and feel like because I didn't directly ask her to stop, it reflects poorly on me. How do you think I should handle this?
Oh, so much to unpack there, actually. For one, I think he should have told the supervisor to help him with the situation, right? Like whoever he reports to could have helped him. I don't know. I guess, where is the kid in all this? Like, changing therapists and that stuff is not good for somebody who is having that type of service. So I think he has to take the bull by the horns, in lack of a better way to say that, and put his foot down. Report it to a supervisor. It's not part of his job description to be able to handle that. Have they trained him to handle that type of situation? So I don't think he did anything wrong. He was trying to make an uncomfortable situation better, but he should report it. She is being inappropriate. Even if he left and another therapist had to go in there, he would want them to know that going in, that this is something that could happen, right? So that stuff has to be on record. But the poor kid actually just needs services. It'd be a shame if he had to switch because now their partner is upset. So I feel like this could be repaired, potentially. potentially.
I think coming from home health, you have conversations with therapists or whomever's going out to the clients. You know, you have a right to set your boundaries if something makes you feel uncomfortable. If you don't, it's implied consent. You've already allowed it to happen. So this mother thinks that she can continue down this path because you've allowed it. You've somewhat engaged in it, not much, but just listening to her, you have engaged in it. Just setting your boundaries first. If that doesn't help, then going to your supervisor. The home health industry, they all know there are people that are inappropriate, whether it be a client, whether it be a parent, whether it be, a child of your client. There are people that are going to be inappropriate. So reporting it to your supervisor and letting them know that you feel uncomfortable, it's the norm. You want to match the client with the therapist so everybody has a good outcome and they can build a good, strong relationship. The same as we do internally, we match the client with the HR business partner so that we have a good outcome. And if it's not a good fit personality-wise, we switch them out and we find somebody else who can work so the client gets what they need, or in this case, the patient gets what they need to be successful in their recovery or their treatment plan.
Well, the one thing I want to add, I know that he's kind of set a precedent, right, for how he's going to be treated. But just from personal experiences, I just don't feel like it's ever too late. To stand up for yourself.
Right, yeah.
Standing up for yourself is important. That's my comment to add. And
it's about the kid. It's not about the parent in this circumstance.
So this is going to bring our episode to a close. We want to thank Lisa Carper for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all so much for listening to this episode of HR Stew. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have any customer service nightmares you would like to share, message us on Instagram at hr.stew. I'm Holly.
And I'm Regina.
And we will see you next time on HR Stew.